Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for March 30th through April 6th. This week I read 5 books, I watched 3 shows, and I listened to 1 book. The first book this week was White Rose by Kip Wilson. This book was sent to me by the publisher for an honest review, and it came out, I believe, on the 2nd of April. This is a novel told in verse about Sophie Stoll, who was a German student during the Second World War who opposed Hitler. Because it's told in verse, it is very quick to get through, which can be seen as both a plus and a minus. On the plus side, you're not having to spend too much time with the atrocities that were being committed, but on the opposite side of that, I wanted to know more about her story. That being said, the author did a lot of research into this person's life, and there's actually a list of sources at the back. They actually have a PhD in German literature. The story also played with the timeline a little bit, jumping back and forth in Sophie's life, and I found that kind of interesting. We kind of start out knowing that she's been captured by the Gestapo, and we don't really know how that's going to go, and we go back and forth to finding out what measures she took to oppose Hitler. So if fighting Nazis appeals to you, you might want to read this book. Next I read We Crossed a Bridge and It Trembled, Voices from Syria by Wendy Pearlman. This was the Life's Library pick for the last little while. This book has a brief introduction to the history of Syria over the last 60 years or so, in case the reader is not particularly familiar with what's been going on. And then the bulk of the book is actually interviews with people from Syria about different time frames in Syria. One of the main purposes of this book was to humanize the people that were fleeing Syria and are newcomers to different countries, and to get some of their stories out there. There are some truly heartbreaking stories in this book, so know that going in, but I think you would have known that going in. I feel like I really learned a lot from this book. After those 2 heavy reads, I needed something a little bit lighter, so I actually read a middle grade. This is the first in the Wollstonecraft Detective Agency, and it's called The Case of the Missing Moonstone. This series is actually written by a local BC author who I met very briefly at the Capital City Comic-Con. He came by the booth where I was trying to sell swords, and I asked him what he was at the con for, and he said he was an author and this is what he writes. So I figured I should pick up the first book because it sounds kind of cute. Essentially, Ada Lovelace is 11, Mary Shelley is 14, and they run a detective agency together. Obviously, this has no basis in actual history. They didn't actually do this. In fact, they were 18 years apart and not 3 years apart in age. But the author made sure to also include historically accurate things. I really enjoyed the premise. I really enjoyed that he uses this as a tool to go into schools and teach children about feminism. And the story is okay. It wasn't my favorite start to a children's series, but for all I know, it gets better from there. After that, on an absolute whim, I picked up Madly Ever After and Fluff My Life, which are the first 2 in the I Hate Fairyland series. This series follows a little girl named Gertrude who gets sucked into Fairyland, and in order to leave, she goes on a quest to find a key. She's been on that quest for 23 damn years and hasn't found the key. However, she's remained a little girl the entire time. The best thing about that is you get this great juxtaposition between this little girl and all of the incredibly gory, bloody things that she does. I honestly don't understand how there are still beings in Fairyland, considering it feels like she's killed all of them. The art is super bright and makes me think of a candy shop. And as soon as I finished the 2nd volume, I hopped onto my library's website and put a hold on volumes 3 and 4 because I need to know how this ends. I also love that even though these are adult graphic novels, they don't actually swear because you're in Fairyland, so they use some very interesting swear words. Let me see if I can find some. Smother Fudger is a pretty good one. They tend to use fluffed instead of a different F word. Oh, and they definitely use spell instead of hell. So if you want something gory and colorful, this series is where it's at. On to what I watched this week. I got together with my friend and we watched a couple of episodes of The West Wing. I think we all know my opinions on this show. I absolutely love the characters. I find it really interesting that some of the politics that they're debating are still being debated today, even though this show aired in 1999 and the episodes we watched aired in early 2000. And of course, let Bartlett be Bartlett. Bartlett for President 2020. Then of course I also watched 2 different seasons of Survivor, which always messes with my brain. And anytime I go to talk about it at this point, I'm just like, things happened. And because I had the house to myself for a couple days, I also watched the first 6 episodes of the 10th season of Rupaul's Drag Race. I'd actually seen a couple of these episodes before, but for whatever reason I didn't see the first episode in the season. So it was fun to revisit some of these queens, especially the ones that end up going home early. The book I listened to this week was The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Here's an interesting thing about the title. That is the title in the UK. In North America, it is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And the reason why they did that is they didn't want North Americans to be confused with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. However, as we all know, I work at a library and we have both UK copies and North American copies of this book, so it's in the catalogue as both the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which is nice and confusing, and you wonder if they're the same book, and yes, they're the exact same. It's not one of those things where there's an extra chapter or something weird. In any case, the premise of this book is very interesting. This person wakes up one day and they don't know where they are, and all they really know is the word that they've screamed out as they wake up, which is Anna. Soon after that, they see somebody die. They realize that they're on this estate in the middle of nowhere, and they go to the house and they try to report that somebody has died, and they're very confused. They don't know who they are. And when they wake up the next day, they wake up in somebody else's body. It turns out that they're going to wake up in a different host's body every day for 8 days, and they are trying to solve the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle. This was a really interesting take on a closed room murder. Essentially, you couldn't leave this estate in the middle of nowhere. One of the hosts tries and can't. And you have this added mystery of why you're there, how you're jumping bodies. You have this person telling you these things. You have somebody else who's trying to kill you because they're trying to solve the murder first. And then you have this protagonist jumping into these different bodies and having to deal with the personalities of the other people and how they view the situations based on the traits inherent to that new host. I also feel like it was a treat to listen to this one because the narrator gave every host a different voice, and then when doing voices for other characters that the hosts were interacting with, they tended to stay the same, which was such a great level of detail. This one is obviously very twisty, very turny, lots of details. But if you want a good closed room murder with a twist, this is definitely one to pick up. That's it for this week because I have to start reading in other lands because this is the week in which I am reading in other lands with all of you lovely people. Because on Saturday the 13th I'm going to be doing a live show about it. If you're participating, please let me know. I'm very excited to talk to all of you about that book. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!